Just like to say welcome and thanks to everyone who's come. And before I begin, I want to say a special thanks to the Guesthouse for the use of the space and the UCC English Literature Society for their time and effort. Just as way of a sort of a short introduction, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce one of Ireland's most varied and exciting poets. For a lot of people here, Trevor Joyce needs no introduction, but the crowd is actually quite varied and new. It's unsettling. He has lived and worked in the city for over 25 years and has been an integral part of the city's cultural makeup. That is, if by cultural makeup you mean sitting in a pub complaining. The importance of Trevor Joyce's contribution to poetry, and in particular Irish poetry, over the last 40 years cannot be overstated. Trevor Joyce was born in 1947 in central Dublin. In 1967, along with Michael Smith, he founded New Writers' Press in order to publish new writing and to challenge what he saw, and I quote, as the stagnancy of the Irish poetry scene relative to what had happened in the US and Europe. In the first few years, New Writers' Press not only published the first collections of both Joyce and Smith, but also the first collections of Brian Lynch, Paul Durkin and Augustus Young. They also engaged with international poetics by publishing an edition of Jack Spicer's Billy the Kid and a collection of Borges's poetry. New Writers' Press also published a magazine called The Lace Curtain, which promoted Irish and international modernists. In particular, re-engaging with the Irish modernists of the 1930s such as Thomas McCreevy, Dennis Devlin and Brian Coffey. Trevor Joyce's early work, which includes Soul Glum Trek in 1967, Watches from 69, Pentahedron from 72 and the Poems of Sweeney Peregrine, a working of the corrupt Irish text from 76. It is around this time that Joyce removed himself from the production of poetry for fear that he would repeat himself. After nearly 2 decades of silence, Joyce returned to writing poetry, and has since gone on to produce more than most poets do their entire lives. Stone Floods appeared in 95, followed by Syzygy and Without Asylum in 98. These and his earlier works, along with a longer semi-autobiographical poem, Trem Nail, was gathered together in his collection with The First Stream of Fire, They Hunt the Cold in 2001. There you go. There is one over there, I think, for sale, obviously. What's in Store was released in 2007 and gathers together all the work written since then, and shows that Joyce's experimentation is not limited to poetry but also affects the construct of the book. It is the only poetry collection to my knowledge that not only has but needs 2 tables of contents. More recently, a collection of his translations,
it's over there.
It is over there, the Courts of Air and Earth.
Yeah.
Was released in 2008 and was shortlisted for the Cornelius M. Perpescu Award. In 1997, Trevor Joyce founded the SoundEye Poetry Festival, which has become one of, if not the largest, yearly gathering of poets in Ireland or anywhere else for that matter, and is, according to Marjorie Perloff, one of the most important ongoing poetry festivals in the Anglophone world. This is the poetry festival scholars of the future will be writing about. Trevor Joyce is also a member of Aishdana and is the 2009 to 2010 Judith E. Wilson Fellow in Cambridge, England. Very good.
I'm deeply impressed by all that. I hardly ever get invited to do something like this, and I know from your point of view, I'm guessing, but an Irish poetry reading is normally somebody reading poetry, soulful lyrics about their childhood and how their father affected them by showing them a cow doing something in a field one day. I don't do that sort of thing. I don't normally tell anecdotes or anything. There's no filler. I normally just read poem to poem to poem to poem, and you follow it or you don't. And I normally read quite fast. It's different tonight because I was asked to do something different, to give an introduction. I'm not going to give a sort of a big block of an introduction at the beginning. What I'm going to do is break and talk largely between sections of poems. As you can see, I've sort of marked with colours different sort of thematics. I'm going to talk about those and then a little bit between actually individual poems occasionally as I move. So I'm just going to start again. I started, I had an aunt, sister of my father, who won regularly the Cork Examiner Prize for Poetry, and she won eventually a skull cap from the then reigning Pope, Pius. And I was shown when I was about 14-year-old a poem that she'd written that had won this prize about a cat walking into a room or something like that. And I was stupid enough to say I could do better than that and kind of slap her in the ear. So I went into a neighbouring room, wrote some doggerel, came back in, and everybody admitted it was better than the Ann's one. So I got hooked on poetry as an easy way of earning sort of attention. So I started trying to figure out how poetry worked, since it appeared that I was good at this sort of thing, but I didn't know what I was good at. I started thinking about it, and then started writing, and by the time I was 17 or 18, I was sort of well embarked. I met another poet in Dublin, Michael Smith, with whom in '69, when I was too young to know better, I co-founded a press. He was about 5 years older than me. He'd been an office boy in the Irish press, so therefore knew everything about publishing. So with the idea that I already knew what poetry was, and it seemed to be about self-expression, and I read bits of poetry by other Irish poets and so on, and it seemed to be all about saying what was happening to you and somehow making it significant, making it sort of sing, using a, very plangent, touching sort of images and figures of speech. This seemed to be it. So I started writing that sort of poetry, and I started complicating it, because I couldn't do otherwise with the way my head works, with the knowledge that there's other stuff beyond that. So just a few of these sort of early poems. The first one is The Importance of the Bells, Mead Street Church. Mead Street was a church on the other side. I was born on the north side of the Liffey. This is one on the south side in the middle of a working class area, and nicely positioned on the side of a hill, so its bells rang out all over central London, or central Dublin rather. The bells are born and die, becoming part of history along with the French Revolution, 2 world wars, Lawrence of Arabia, and the death of the cat who is posing dramatically in the gutter. Acts are expectorated, and when the spittle hardens into facts, our lives are emerald threads of mucus. The clamorous life of the bells is short and eventful, comprehensive of squalor and of the drab other ways of living. The disembodied tones finger carp on a slab, and the red necks awry in a poulterer's window, frenetic search for pattern before giving up the ghost. The Angelus is rung. Surely somewhere a seed quickens. The results of this act follow. Fishwife wipes her hands on a fish grey apron, crosses herself, an urchin crossing the street to inspect a corpse in the gutter stops to register the 18 chimes, and the steel blue gutted fish insistent on the facts of life. So you can read that. I'm not completely, any more than anybody else, in control of all my meanings, but I would read that partly as a sort of, a teenage response to sort of the sensuality, the suddenness of the world, but with a knowledge that there's lots of other stuff that, history has happened, it's still happening. There's stuff happening beyond where I am, and I'm not in control of it, can't be. Diagram plus sun. A thin gravel of coal, of grain and shattered glass, glistening preciously in the shadow of a slag heap, in the huge darkness of a crane that circles the sun like a searching blade. Grouping doves stab after corn here, and the shape of the high gnomon plays across their plumaged dove-grey heads and their subtle breasts, and gradually the chipped glass dulls, the prisms sift no more bright fluids, and the waters slow. Through hours the river halts, reverses, and the dredgers sweep around, dragging their stern ropes out. The rustle of a tautening hawser furrows the sapphire dusk. A lissom fog vaulted the debris channel to see its shape scored glaucously. The tart air moults a sultry ash. Tight bars of steel mount like elongated boulders. A golden bird swoops to its eyrie high on the crag metal. A sabre crane boom scabs the throbbing blue aorta in a brutal pivot. 2 locked sparrows drop out of an alley's mouth. The small grenade squawked, fractioning, jolting the feathers down onto the river's skin to be sloughed in another ocean at another time. And somebody, maybe a child, asked, "Aren't birds strange, and has the sun bled all away?" Reading that, I can see influence of poets from Eastern Europe who were beginning to be known at that time in the sort of just getting into the late 60s. Miroslav Holub and Zbigniew Herbert, who you've heard of. And also expressionist work. And it's difficult, this mixture of what you're actually feeling. I mean, you don't doubt your own pain. If somebody drives a knife into your hand or something like that, you're in no doubt that you possess that pain in a sense, and yet it has an objective quality. It's in the world. What do you do with this? How do you balance it without talking about it and making it writing philosophy about it? A philosopher might, but I'm not a philosopher, I'm a poet.